Right, welcome back to Turdtowns, the channel that shines a light on the lesser known places in the UK. London, Shundon. Cambridge, Shamebridge. Bath, you're having a laugh. We aren't interested in any of that boring stuff. To see the rest of the UK, you'll have to leave the tourist map, but you may want to avoid the places on today's list. As you're going to see in this video, we encountered our first major threats of violence just for filming in their town. Stay tuned for that. We're about to ramp up our video output, so if there's somewhere you'd like to see us visit, make sure it's in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to help Turdtowns thrive. Today it's going to be the 8 biggest turd towns in Gwent, Wales. Wales is not England, it's a completely different country. There you go, that's for my American viewers. And it's also split into different counties, and in today's video we'll be focusing on Gwent, but for the purpose of this video we're calling it Monmouthshire, which it's known as nowadays. We don't mean any offence, it's got to be called something, hasn't it? Monmouthshire is an area of Wales which includes many of the Welsh valleys. These are traditionally areas which are economically centred around mining, but the mines were mainly shut down in the 70s and 80s. When the mines shut, the towns of the valleys suffered. There was no more work, and many of the valley towns have lacked infrastructure and investment ever since. It's grim and depressing here. Something we found unusual was, if this was in a different part of the country, it might be considered a beautiful place. Steep mountains, lambs and wildlife everywhere, lots of history. Maybe the valleys can turn themselves into a tourist attraction in the future. But they have a long way to go first. Right now the valleys are like the urinals of Wales, full of dirt, piss stench and the occasional scattered turd. The people of Wales are proud and respectful people, and the children are raised right here. And I want to make a point of that. The manners of the majority of the Welsh people we ran into were far above the English. But that's probably the most positive you're going to hear from me in this video. People of Monmouthshire, you might want to close your eyes. Number 8, Pontypool. We start off our list with Pontypool, which certainly feels and sounds Welsh enough. It's a town with a population of 29,000 and it's located in one of the many valleys of Monmouthshire, an Afon Llwyd. God, I hope there isn't any more double L's in this video. Pontypool regularly flags up as a horrible place to live, so we had to visit and find out for ourselves. And yeah, there's a lot of derelict and crumbling buildings here, and the high street looks like it was hit by a nuclear bomb. But the people here don't seem to have given up hope. I'm not sure if we got lucky on the day we visited, but there was a busy market going on in the middle of the high street. This distracted from whether or not the shops behind them were open in the first place. Very clever. There was also a nice indoor market, which I must report seemed to have most of the stalls functioning. This is something that you'd potentially visit from another town. The rest of the place though, wow, what a rundown dump. Even where they've tried to build new buildings, they have no tenants in them, so that proves to be a giant waste of time and money. It's all just a bit depressing and almost eerie here. If you want to live in this dump, you have to pay the average house price of $179,000. And that might not prove to be a bad choice, because in our opinion, when we next visit Pontypool it will have improved and we'll miss out on this list. Because for once in this channel's illustrious history, Pontypool is actually receiving some levelling up funds from the government. That is official. This is going to lead to several currently derelict buildings being transformed into ones with new uses. And that's going to help the place, because there is a lot of potential here. The strong community spirit in Pontypool will most likely shine through, and coupled with their multiple parks and green spaces, that should be enough to help improve it. But currently, I can't ignore it and it's a bit of a dump with a high crime rate, so we'll call it a turd that can be polished. Number 7, Cwmbran. Cwmbran is a large area with a population of 50,000 creatures, making this the 6th largest place in the country of Wales. And it's really near to the city of Newport, only about 6 miles away. That's not a good thing. That was a bad thing. It's kind of like having a wrong 'un living down your road. It seems funny enough until you go to sell your house and realise the listing of criminal adjacent 3-bed terrace doesn't quite have the best ring to it. Cwmbran has to be one of the most bizarre places I've ever visited. It's not like any of the other places on this list. It certainly doesn't feel Welsh. I'm not sure where all the historic buildings have gone, it's just plain ugly here. Well, it turns out this town was actually only established in 1949, so it has no history. And like most things that were born in 1949, it's unapologetic, grey and set in their ways. Kinda like your uncle at Christmas. It's essentially a new town which gobbled up some old villages. So what do you get with Cwmbran? Well, it's essentially a massive car park surrounded by a 60s style bomb shelter shopping mall and thousands of council houses that look like they need to be condemned. These things look like they're constructed from a concoction of wood, asbestos and tears. And there's thousands of them, each street looks the same. We even saw a gaming chair on a top floor balcony on the council flats. I can't imagine what the monstrosity inside their place must look like if they'd rather take in the view of Cwmbran. Wait, no, I'm missing the major landmark of Cwmbran. A giant 210-foot council flat which can be seen from miles around. This thing looks like it belongs in the middle of a London hellhole, but no, it's here instead. I presume the views are quite nice from up top, but from down below, it's a different story. I feel dizzy and sick looking up at this thing. So Cwmbran definitely tops the ugly scale for this list. Another ugly aspect to Cwmbran is the embarrassingly high crime rate of 175 crimes per 1,000 people. That's 109% higher than the Monmouthshire average. And it's only topped by one place that's coming up at the end of this video. Most of the crimes here are for violence and sexual offences, but it also scored poorly for public order offences, shoplifting, robbery and public order offences. Not surprising when about 80% of the place is shops. And if you want to live here, the price for all these fun and games is a staggering $219,000. It's actually one of the most expensive places in Monmouthshire. You have to assume that's due to the proximity to the cities of Newport, Cardiff and Bristol. Just like how it's more expensive to sit near the inflatable crash slides on a plane. You're paying more to have the privilege of being able to escape. In Cwmbran's favour, and this might surprise a few of you, inside this 60s centre style bombshell shopping mall, it's actually a lot of really cool independent shops, and they mostly seem to be open. Yeah, it's not the prettiest shopping mall we've ever been to, but we had some fun looking around it. Overall though, Cwmbran is just weird, pointless, ugly and has a bad crime rate. Number 6. Ebbw Vale. We originally visited Ebbw Vale thinking it was just your typical Welsh mining town, but it turned out to be one of our most hateable cesspits of humanity, and we had to rename it Mega Fail. Ebbw Vale is a town with a population of 19,600. For people across the water, Ebbw Vale has only ever been heard of for one reason, and that's one reason only: dating apps. Now hear me out on this one. People, if you're from the West Country, you no doubt got matched with girls from here, because the dating app didn't understand the giant river separating England and Wales. And from what I remember, there were supposed to be a lot of beautiful girls in Ebbw Vale. Unfortunately, that turned out to be false based on the evidence here. On the surface, it actually seems better than many of the other Welsh mining towns. It doesn't seem quite as ugly, and there's possibly more big chain shops. It doesn't really feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. They also transformed derelict areas into monuments to their history. No, there was never a real dragon in Ebbw Vale. It's a symbol of Wales. When this dragon was built in 2014, the council truly believed that this would attract visitors to the area. Whilst the dragon does look cool, come on, you're hardly going to visit a depressing dump like this just to see a dragon statue. Talking of attracting people to the area, there used to be a large out-of-town shopping centre here with over 30 shops, stuff for the kids to do like water slides, and this place employed lots of locals. I'm of course talking about Festival Park. There isn't much celebrating going on here anymore. All the shops slowly vacated the premises and it was closed completely 2 years ago. Now it resembles something out of The Walking Dead. There's no one here apart from a possibly infected security guard. Plans were revealed in January to turn it into an industrial estate. How exciting. The average house price in Ebbw Vale is $142,000, which is just a little bit more than some other places on this list, presumably due to the decent transport links. It has its own station, and the Head to the Valley dual carriageway nearby. If you really feel like you're sick of Ebbw Vale, it's easy enough to escape nowadays. It's just pretty much what you'd expect here. There's nothing to eat but Wetherspoons, there's closed down shops all over the place. Nothing was really jumping out at us more than anywhere else. Until something did. And I knew this would happen eventually, it was just a matter of time. One of the locals, who looked like he had 3 teeth and 3 brain cells, accused us of filming him, and Turdtowns was almost ended before it barely started. He was kind enough to give us an offer of either giving him a fiver or we'd smash our cameras. On the face of it, not a great deal either way. I feel like he may struggle on Dragon's Den. And yeah, I must admit we were amused why a man was walking down the middle of the main street singing about putting things in people's butts at midday on a Saturday.
With his head down the toilet!
So yeah, we did try and film him, but then we backed off. Judging by the crowds of onlookers cheering him on and encouraging an encore like Elton John's Candle in the Wind, this song and dance must be an Ebbw Vale tradition.
I see myself on that, I swear on my man, but the next time I see that face, I will snap the control.
Well, it's not a tradition we wanted any part of. We packed up and left, and we made a promise to ourselves we won't ever go back to Ebbw Vale, because this town's a mega fail and it's like a trip to hell. Number 5, Blaenau. Blaenau is a town with a population of 6,000 and it's located in the middle of nowhere, deep up the ass crack of one of the many Welsh valleys. When you think of a Welsh mining village, this is probably the picture in your head. Steep mountains on either side of the place, small cobbled terraced houses stretching for ages. Everything's grey. This was of course the home of the Big Pit. And it's very grim here, the true stereotype of a Welsh mining town. The founders of this place decided to build it up the side of a steep hill like something out of the Wild West. and for some reason it seems to get worse the further up the hill you go. That's the opposite of how it usually seems to work on Turdtowns. You start out in Blaenau at the bottom of the hill with a more touristy part of the place, as there's the big pit museum. Sadly, when it closed, this place began to suffer. Then you make your way up the high street, and calling this a high street would be generous. Considering how isolated it is here, you'd think they'd have more facilities for locals and visitors alike. But it's a complete disappointment. As you huff and puff your way up this steep crumbling streets past empty shops and decaying buildings, you reach the next area. And this has to go down as one of the ugliest housing estates we've seen on Turdtowns. These houses closely resemble shacks, also like you'd find in the Wild West. And it just goes on forever, somehow getting progressively worse. So it's a place set above a giant hole. It's steep, the place is a complete waste, it smells funny here, and you feel better once you reach the end of it. Blaenau is a turd going into the toilet. Unfortunately, this place isn't likely to improve anytime soon, as it missed out on the levelling up money to turn derelict buildings into a posh hotel. I guess the setting wasn't right for something posh. According to our research, Blaenau is meant to be a book town, but I can't even remember seeing a single bookshop. I imagine if there was, they wouldn't be selling Great Expectations, because the irony would be just too much. So I would say this tourist venture is a complete failure. Honestly, this place is just a grim reminder of the way life used to be 50 years ago. Maybe Blaenau is best left off in the past and forgotten about. Number 4. Bryn Mawr. We did not like it here. Unlike most of the entries on today's list, you can tell used to be thriving and look nice. There's just no hope for Bryn Mawr. It probably always looked like this. Bryn Mawr is a town with a population of 5,250. It's at the top of one of the valleys, so you'd think that might help the place with the better transport links to make it more prosperous. Because indeed, this is another place to benefit from the recently built Heads of the Valleys road. They built a pretty memorable bridge here as part of that scheme, but if you ask me, they'd have been better off extending the bridge so it crushed the whole of this town and people could go over it. Everything just looks sad here in this former market town. The main street branches off from the market area up a hill. Just don't bother going up it, it's a waste of time. You won't see a single thing you could possibly want. The square has a cinema, which I'm told is the oldest in Wales, and I'm told that when they decide to show a film it queues around the block. This is a reflection of two things. The people here have nothing better to do, and also the internet hasn't quite yet reached Bryn Mawr. Although I may have to buy a ticket for when Titanic finally makes it to the cinema. Average house price here is $149,000, and although the exact crime data is unavailable, the rumour has it that crime actually reduced when McDonald's opened because the criminals became too fat to run away. And what the hell is this ugly thing opposite McDonald's? Somebody tell me, please. I've never seen anything as ugly as that. Number 3. Abertillery. Bleak and depressing, the sort of place that you come to get your dog put down. It's yet another former pit town in a Welsh valley with a population of 10,252. It's actually the next place down the valley from Bryn Mawr, so this is probably a valley that you're best avoiding. In the early 1900s, there were over 20,000 people living here. It's thought that people are still leaving. It's just a continuous, slow, consistent exodus, like a fire drill at a retirement home. The best thing about this place is probably its name. If you pronounce it wrong, it sounds like an advanced weapon. The good news ends there though. This is a pretty desperate place. It just feels like it's on the verge of the end. Abertillery must set the record for the most closed down shops I've ever seen. And no, it's not Welsh Saturday hours. We were here before midday. They are empty stores. What the hell happened here? The owners of these shops really need to reduce the rents and at least let someone make a go at making a business work. It could be alright here, at least it's not too hilly on the high street. It could be a nice intimate setting, but the A road up the valley bypasses it all. Why would anyone ever turn off the A-pass into Abertillery? The Welsh people are proud people, very defensive and respectful of their culture and heritage. But when we asked locals in other towns where the worst place in the valleys was, they all had one answer: Abertillery. They threw it under the bus. A lot of the places in the valleys look similar and share similar problems. Ultimately, it came down to the high crime rate and just how ugly this place is compared to the rest. The local lads were extremely well spoken and happy to show off their bike skills though. So if these are your kids, give yourself a pat on the back. You raised them well. It's a shame these lads have to grow up here though, because in any other environment they could be our future doctors, judges and scientists. Notice how I didn't say politicians. I don't want to insult anyone. Abertillery is one of the most derelict and rundown places I've ever seen. But there are a couple more places we've got to cover that are somehow worse, believe it or not. Abertillery has the cheapest average house prices on this list, coming at an incredibly low average of $123,000. It was once said that the cheapest houses to buy in the entire UK were here. This demonstrates two things. It is A, less than the price of a brand new Range Rover, and B, it's extremely cheap compared to the average for the county of £251,000. I'd call it a bargain, but at the end of the day you'd be living in Abertillery. So in essence, you'd be better off buying the Range Rover, parking it in a field and sleeping in the boot. Number 2. Rumney. Rumney? More like Crimney. This town with a population of 4,989 is located at the top of one of the many valleys we drove through on this trip. It's not far from Merthyr Tydfil, which won't be featuring in today's list as it's a different county. And boy, do we have that treat to look forward to. We're starting to learn on this channel that often the worst places are not the ones you've researched or planned to visit. They're in fact often places you've never heard of. We mostly stumbled on this place and almost threw up on entering this valley. First of all, to call this place a town in the first place is a complete insult to the word town. We've seen a lot of rundown high streets on today's video, but it doesn't seem there's much in Rumney town in the first place. It's basically a long thin streak of piss type place. All the houses look terrible here. There's a shop, a pub, a library and a garage, and that's about all they've got. Also, like many places on today's list, Rumney is a former mining town that went to the dogs when the pits closed. I can't imagine there's much to do in the way of work here nowadays. That is unless you're employed as a bailiff, specialising in evictions. Because other than the final place on today's video, I have never seen so many boarded up homes. And it's not like we even went looking for these, they were laced along the main street. What happened here? Why are so many homes boarded up? They could have at least been given to the Welsh homeless. Well, except that one guy in Ebbw Vale. For a place this pretty small, you wouldn't expect to see these scenes. It looks like something out of Liverpool. And even the houses that aren't boarded up look depressing and grim. Yeah, and it was really cold here too. Even setting up the drone was an unwanted experience, as everywhere we tried to sit down was covered in smashed glass and rubbish. There's burnt out wasteland everywhere here too. Presumably the residents of Crimney were trying to destroy the evidence, because there's a lot of crime here. Crimney has an average crime rate of 107 in 1,000, which is around 30% higher than the Monmouthshire average. You get the feeling that they weren't used to outsiders here, and after all, why would they be? An outsider would never have any reason to come here. We were glared at by several window dwellers. Crimney does actually have a train station, which is handy for escaping this hellhole. Very useful, I'm sure. If for some bizarre reason you actually want to live in Crimney, you can expect to pay an extremely cheap house price of $114,000, the cheapest on this entire list. But then again, that's probably a rip-off, because it may as well be free seeing as half the houses are empty and boarded up here. There's nothing to do here, it's isolated, the locals are unfriendly, there's no shops, but hey, at least its transport link's okay having its own train station. But overall, it's not worth living here, because living in Rumney ain't really living. Number 1. Newport. The most famous place on this list, even though I bet no one's watching has ever been there, and there's a perfectly good reason for that. Newport is a city located near to the Welsh border and not far from the River Severn crossing into England. This means it's not located in the valleys and therefore has a completely different look to many of today's entrances. This city has a population of 130,000 and is the third biggest place in Wales. First of all, if you're from the south of England, you've probably been to Cardiff, which is the next city along from Newport. But ask yourself and your friends why you've never been to Newport. I can tell you why. There's nothing worth seeing here, and worse still, you'll probably get smacked one. The town centre is appalling. A third of the shops here are closed down and boarded up, while strange men hang around the town centre doing nothing at all. Even at 6 AM. What could they possibly even be doing at this time? You have to remind yourself that Newport's a city. There's nothing here. The high street is an embarrassment. I've been to towns which have more impressive streets. And yes, there is a small new shopping centre similar to Cabot Circus in Bristol. What, is that supposed to impress me? One small thing. Newport is just an ugly, grim place, but the town centre is the least of their worries. When it comes to crime rates in Monmouthshire, the top 2 worst parts fall into Newport. That would be Pegwenley and Betters. But these are by no means the only bad parts of Newport. These mould-covered estates are all over the place. It's actually more of a challenge finding a street that I would describe as bearable. But for the bad stuff, we've decided to focus on Pegwenley, or Peel as it's often referred to by the locals. And that name's incredibly inappropriate, because drug use is rampant in this part of Newport. There's actually a weekly team that do good work. They go around Peel and pick up hundreds of needles in a single session. Peel is actually a continuation of the same road that the High Street is located on. So technically, this is the main road in Newport. What a dump, isn't it? This place, I was shocked to see it, because it's a real eye-opener. Places like this exist in the UK, which is supposed to be a first world country. Flats and houses are boarded up everywhere. The ones which aren't boarded up are on the verge of total collapse. Grimy bedsits litter the streets containing the most desperate and unfortunate in the entire Welsh country. In the alleyways you can find homeless camps like something out of Los Angeles. Just walking around we felt like we were in a Ross Kemp documentary. We could only film so much as it wasn't really appropriate. Even we have a point that we draw a line. So never visit Peel, because this is what it looks like at 7 AM, so just think what it would look like once the inmates have woken up. But Pegwedley isn't the only bad part of Newport. There are also other parts of Newport which make the list for the most crime in Monmouthshire, like Betters, which is one of the most dreariest places in humanity. In fact, there were 14 areas in total which ranked in the 10% most deprived in Wales. Newport probably deserves its own video, but to be honest, we don't ever want to go back there. Newport itself has a high average house price of $227,000, I guess because it's a city, but you're better off living literally anywhere else. 2 years ago, 2 of the secondary schools were placed on a list for not delivering an acceptable standard of education. There were only 4 schools on this entire list, so people can't even read or write in Newport. And it's not a statistic that I would normally mention, but one thing I will say in Newport's favour is that it's extremely diverse compared to the rest of Monmouthshire. The ethnicity here is 85% white, which doesn't sound like much, but it's actually the most diverse place we've covered so far. And this can only help a city that's based in an area set in its ways. I mean, even the pigeons were fighting over a naan bread. The rivers around Newport are a filthy brown colour, and a huge transporter bridge dominates the skyline. I wonder what happened after they tore down the Middlesbrough transporter bridge in Alfida St. Pet. To go along with all this depression, of course, Newport was the most crime-ridden place in Wales, beating both Cardiff and Swansea. Well, at least that's the hardest one out of the way then. In its favour, I don't know, I'm really reaching here. Newport does have a team in the Football League, which I believe is only the second time that's happened on this channel. Despite the size of Newport, they get poor attendances. You'd think the city would want to get behind the team, it's not as if the residents of Newport have anything else to cheer for. Honestly, if you're looking for a new house or you're a tourist, just keep on driving past on the M4 into Cardiff. Yes, that has its rough parts too, but it's far better in every single way. Newport is just Cardiff's deprived, depraved, depressed, diarrhea-drizzled little brother. Avoid this place like your life depends on it. So that's the list for Monmouthshire Gwent. Did we miss any places out? Let us know the next county we should visit, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to help Turdtowns thrive.